muchísimas gracias, one more time, por venir al workshop de hoy. Tendremos a Antal Sivok de Apogee, es el Sales Manager para Europa, Europa y otros territorios, ¿de acuerdo? Y vamos a hablar un poco de audio inmersivo, que es algo que en los últimos tiempos está teniendo bastante run run. Sobre todo Dolby Atmos, ¿de acuerdo? Pero gracias a Dolby Atmos, un poco todo lo que teníamos hasta la fecha y que tampoco había acabado de cuajar como formatos como el 5.1 o 7.1, están cobrando una nueva juventud, ¿vale? Entonces veremos un poco qué es Apogee y de qué manera Apogee, digamos, soporta y se integra en entornos de producción musical de audio inmersivo. Luego conectaremos online con Bob Clearmountain, que básicamente es uno de los productores con más Grammys, ¿de acuerdo? Los más grandes han trabajado con él. Y en los 80, si querías triunfar en Estados Unidos, tenías que pasar por sus manos, sí o sí. Es decir, y es una persona que ha visto el crecimiento del audio digital, ¿de acuerdo? Un poco también de la mano de Apogee, el crecimiento de estos formatos envolventes, surround, inmersivos, y también nos dará un poco su feedback de cómo ve la industria, y también podremos aprovechar para hacer todas las preguntas que se nos puedan ocurrir hacerle, porque seguramente no tendremos una oportunidad igual para hacerlo. Y luego ya para finalizar revisaremos una mezcla de un tema muy conocido producido por Bob Clearmountain, para ver de qué manera trabajaba y qué trucos utilizaba y todo esto, ¿vale? Si queréis interrumpir en cualquier momento, levantad la mano, os pondré el micro, por si no quedará un poco raro, porque estamos grabando la presentación de hoy para luego colgarlo online. Y sin más rollos, os dejo con Antal para que os explique un poco todo el ecosistema de Apogee. Welcome.
Thank you very much, everybody, for being here with us in this wonderful afternoon in Barcelona, Spain. Technically speaking, my name is Tony. Everybody calls me like that, but my real name is Antal Sebek. I'm from Hungary, and I'm handling the EMEI territories for Apogee, which means Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and India. And in Europe, Spain is a very important market because a huge music scene here. Therefore, we would like to tell a bit more about us, a bit more about Apogee, because Apogee just turned 14 years old this year, so we are technically dinosaurs, but the fancy dinosaurs. So yeah.
Come here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Let me tell you a bit about our history. Apogee back in the day was founded in 1985 with Betty Clearmountain, who is Betty Bennett. She is the co-founder and our CEO of Apogee. Before Apogee, she was the president of Soundcraft United States of America, and after Soundcraft acquired by the Harman Group back in the 80s, she just founded a new company, which we know nowadays as Apogee. And Bob Clearmountain, also a very important person in Apogee's heritage and life, because back in the day when Betty just tried to sell some interface for Bob in New York City, Bob just asked her, can it be friends or something, because I like you and things like that. And Betty just told him, I have enough friends. So now they married for several decades. That's how they came together back in the day. And Bob Clearmountain, don't need much introduction, but he's the archetype of the mixing engineer. Back in the day, Bob was one of the first engineers who not define himself as a recording engineer, a mixing and a mastering engineer at the same time, but he spent so much effort to specialize himself as the first ever mixing engineer. And he made quite a career as a mixing engineer. Back in the 80s and in the beginning of the 90s, Bob was one of the few engineers in the world who, if you wanted really big hit on the radio stations and all around the globe, you need to work with Bob Clearmountain if you are a rock musician. And the first product of Apogee, before Bob and Betty's joint story, was this oversampling filter, which was a filter for reel-to-reel tape machines. Back in the day, reel-to-reel tape machines was not as good as we know as today. It was noisy, it was a bit murky, and the Apogee filters, what they did was the first step, which let's just say upgraded the sound of the reel-to-reel tapes. And after they just sent out these first few pieces as prototypes to certain engineers, word spread fast, and everybody wanted to work with Apogee enriched or upgraded reel-to-reel machines back in the day. So this was the first step on a long road, on a long journey. The second, which was a huge impact, it was the AD8000. That was the first really successful 8-channel AD, 8D and D2A converter back in the day. Everybody wanted one. It was a modular design. You can put in ADAT cards, old Pro Tools cards, and many other option cards back in the day. And you can configure this unit. It's pretty standard nowadays, but back in the day, this was a revolutionary concept. Not many companies did that. So yeah, with big consoles back in the day, this was a very good solution to expand your work, to work a bit more inside the first DAWs, like was the first Pro Tools versions was. And we introduced another cool feature back in the day, the soft limit, which was a limiter. But in the meantime, this limiter is not really killing your transients, and it was a really good solution to preserve the dynamics. But in the meantime, you don't necessarily need to re-record or reprint your material. Let's jump a bit ahead of time. The Duet series now, what we know today, we have the third version of it. But back in the day, the Duet was the first really successful desktop interface in the market. The desktop interface was really important, especially for home studios, not for the big studios, obviously, because not too many channels, but you have really good Apogee converters inside with really good mic preamps. And also in the meantime, it's a small format, it's really portable, so you can bring with you can put it to your own backpack, you can go with this interface to a far destination to do some on-site recordings. It was really a groundbreaking idea back in the day, because it's easy to carry. And jump ahead of time a bit again, we did the first official accessory for the iOS platform back in the day. This was the Jam. We now have the Jam X and the Jam Plus these days. Now the Jam X is the only living product. There's an analog compressor inside, but back in the day, the first Jam was a really good high-Z interface for your iPhone, and later for your iPad. The next generation of Jams was compatible not just with the iPhone, but with the iPad as well. And now you can record your guitar lines, your channels, your ideas. Even you can send that recording to your engineer, for example. You not necessarily need to go to a proper studio to do something with your music and with your ideas. So it's really small, I mean exceptionally small. Later, you can check by yourself. This is the latest generation of the Jam. Yeah. So this is the latest generation of the Jam series. Now it's the same concept. You have a nice high-Z input in the front, and you now have an analog, not a digital, an analog compressor inside, which is really good to preserve some dynamics, but in the meantime, avoid some clipping. So yeah, technically speaking, which things works, then let's move a little bit on forward. So then, but let's jump ahead again. On the picture, you can see the Symphony IO Mark II, which is the same heritage of the previous Apogee multi-channel interfaces, but it's Thunderbolt-based. It can be a 32 by 32 channel interface, can be a SoundGrid interface, can be a Dante interface, can be a Pro Tools HDX interface, and also, if you want, you can buy multiple input and output modules to it. Can be a 2x6 mastering card, can be a 16 by 16 line in and output card, and can be an 8-channel mic pre card. The only limitation is via SoundGrid, which is can be an 8-channel mic card, upgraded device, or a 32 by 32 device. But the Symphony what I showed you previously was the second generation of the big symphony interfaces. The previous one was the Silver Mark I, which is now an EO product, an obsolete product. Many people love the idea and the sound of the symphonies. So they wanted something portable, smaller, but with the same quality of the sound. So we came up with the Symphony Desktop, which as you can see here. The Symphony Desktop was the same kind of idea. The same converters, but with less channels, obviously. It's not modular, but you have really good high quality Apogee preamps, which can be also a really preamp powerhouse because we have plugins inside, softwares inside in this little beast. Can be a Neve kind of 73-ish preamp or a very American soundish preamp, and you can run many plugins. Back in the day, it was not that obvious. Now we have multiple competitors who doing things like this, but you can run up to maybe 50 plugins at the same time. For example, EQs and compressors, depends on its stereo or mono, or how many compressors you would like to use at the same time, or even any other effects.
But these plugins are for monitoring, for processing?
Oh, very good question. These plugins can be input, print plugins, or can be monitor plugins, which means you can send the enriched sound to your singer, for example, to have an idea how the final product is going to look like. I mean, some compressors, EQ, stuff like that to your singer as a monitor effects. But can be a print effects as well. If you want to record that sound altered like with the plugins and the compressors and the EQs, you can do that as well. So it's a multi-platformish kind of thing, multi-purpose, that's a better word. So yeah, and it's expandable via ADAT. So if you have a 8-channel expander, you can use as well. It's pretty convenient in that way. You have two headphone output matrices, and you have a high quality high Z input on the front. It's touchscreen based as the big brother is. So yeah, you can have a Symphony in your backpack. But to move a little bit forward, I would like to ask you a question. Any of you guys working on immersive audio, Atmos, mixing, producing music for Atmos, Dolby Atmos? One? Okay, that's good because in that case, I can talk a little bit more about it. Back in the day, a lot of people believed Atmos is just for film. Because, why should I let fly my singer above my head? It's not as music as it is. But it's not that simple. Atmos for film is a different approach. Because Atmos for film, you might be, need to portray a helicopter above your head or maybe some people behind you. But with music, you have a little bit more freedom. You don't need to be that realistic in that case. And you have multiple approach to do this. So Atmos, yes or no, for music, is a seasonal trend or a perpetual standard? Many people believe these days Atmos is just the trend, going to last for a few years, but it's not going to be a permanent thing because how to listen to a proper Atmos mix at home. Dolby spent so much effort to include the technologies to small soundbars, even to your phone, even to your iPad, even to your home cinema speakers somehow. It's not necessarily the same as Atmos, but depends on the complexity of your system, it can be. But how to deliver? Because if you are a studio owner, a producer, an engineer, you need to have a studio which is Atmos capable. To build an Atmos capable studio, you need 12 speakers at least, which is the 7.1.4 configuration. And it's not so cheap. Fortunately, in the close past, for example, IK Multimedia came up with a nice bundle, which is now a very affordable way to get into Atmos. And this is what we did as well with our new Symphony generation that I would like to show you guys a little bit later. So how to deliver? You cannot deliver without speakers Atmos at this very moment, but we're going to talk about this even further. So supporters of Atmos, who drives the market? Who makes people to jump into Atmos? Technically speaking, Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, and the hardware and car manufacturers, everybody jumping into Atmos because the concept is viable. It's a brand new experience. Even the newest Mercedes EQS series upgraded to Atmos. You can find an Atmos speaker inside those cars, and many other manufacturers doing that. Polestar, even the European manufacturers like Renault and many others. So it's not just a high-end, high-spec studio thing or some really rich hi-fi enthusiasts who can experience Atmos these days.
No, a good way of mixing Atmos is with this.
Yeah.
What you listen here, when you translate it to the speakers,
Yeah.
it sounds amazingly the same.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
we will talk about this a little bit later because the binaural way of listening Atmos, it's upgraded and let's just say evolved a lot in the past few years. Because binaural, it's not even the same stereo as you can feel from the speakers because you don't have crosstalk with binaural. Because a simple stereo setup have some crosstalk. That's how both speakers are going to reach your ear. With binaural, you have two speakers in your head, and it's a different approach, but that's also the fun part of binaural, because in that case, Dolby came up with a solution how to experience Atmos in a binaural way. But binaural can solve my problem to jump into Atmos? Yes and no. If you have experience with speakers and Atmos, just a bit, you can understand what you need to hear on your headphones. Of course, you can use your Apple earbuds, you can use some Audi's headphones, Neumann headphones, depends on your choice. But you don't have multiple speakers, so you need to listen a lot of music in Atmos with those devices to understand what's going to happen on the speaker field. If some people would like to experience that music you made on the cinema or in your studio, which is Atmos speaker, enabled. And a lot of people believes, I just need some cheap headphones and I can mix in Atmos. That's not necessarily true, because in that case, you have the same analogy as you can feel, for example, if you would like to convert an MP3 to a WAV file. You can, but to make a new file from WAV to MP3, that's okay, that's possible. But the other way around is not necessarily. So you need a really good quality headphone, a pair of headphones to do Atmos mixing, and a lot of extra learning curve to learn how to do that. Some people told us, in the near future, maybe I can use some AI algorithms to convert my stereo music to Atmos. That's not necessarily possible because Atmos is a multi-channel format. If you have only 2 channels, you cannot make 12 from it. Something maybe can be the result. Somehow you can come up with some result, but it's not going to be the same. If some people would like to listen to that music in a cinema or somewhere else, it's going to be garbage. Because, from 2 channels, you cannot generate 12. That's not how this works.
Okay. Some people, what they're doing is that they're doing the stem separation,
Yeah.
and they're trying to do with the stem separation,
That's right.
the Atmos mix, but the system figures it out, and it tells you this is not a real, it's coming from a stem, so they won't accept it.
Exactly. And one more thing. We're talking a lot to the Apple people because, we have a close relationship with Apple because of our cooperations from in the past and in the future and in the present time. And they told us, because of their affiliation and their commitment to just bring Atmos to the people, it's going to be mandatory in the close future to have an Atmos mix alongside with your stereo mix to upload to Apple Music, to Tidal, to Spotify, and to many other places. Just with a simple stereo mix, you cannot upload your music to those services. It's going to happen in the next few years. Dolby guys told us, and the Apple guys told us, so yeah, it's pretty much a reality these days. But if you would like to do an Atmos mix, what you should do? Some people remixing old stuff to Atmos. For example, records that made back in 40 years ago, or 50 years ago, or just 20 years ago when Atmos was not really a reality back in the day. In that case, you need to do a faithful recreation and expansion of that record sometimes, because not necessarily the older people and the older generation want to experience the magic, but some people does. So there's multiple approaches, and you need to decide which audience is going to be the final destination of your work. Because if you see this Dolby Renderer screenshot, you can see this is an older approach. how you can remix an older track for Atmos. You have multiple dimensions as an options now. You can put your music to the 3D landscape, but it's not horizontal, of course, it's vertical at the same time. But you cannot do what I will show you now, the modern conception necessarily, because with modern conceptions, modern music, you not necessarily have the limits, you don't have rules, you don't have people who expecting something. You can come up with your own, very original ideas in that case. I mean, it's not that stricted as remixing older products, older tracks and songs. True artistic freedom to sculpt your mixes. Because, for example, a modern approach can look like this. Way more objects, way more ideas how to place those objects in the mix. You can put your additional channels to another dimension. It can move around your head sometimes, and it can be a really good experience. I'm going to show you some projects later, which is built exactly on this perspective. So no standard way of mixing in Atmos. Many engineers do it differently, especially back in the first few years of Atmos. There was a capital way how Steve Jenvig did it. Their approach of mixing is based on objects, but many other approaches exist. You name it, the Bob Clearmountain approach, which is more like an analog-based, not really on object, but more like on the music. That's not the best word. More like the organic way of mixing in Atmos. But you can do an Atmos mix in the box, of course, like a stereo mix. You can use the analog way. For example, Bob Clearmountain's system with the big SSL G Plus console, it's built with a 16-channel G-Bus compressor to use on any Atmos channel. But you can ask for him, not too far from now, because now we're moving closer and closer to his time when you can talk to Bob as well if you want to. So digital way, analog way, up mixing, down mixing, depends on. You have the freedom to choose your own way. And if you want an Atmos room, there is some restrictions, which is not really a restriction, more like an opportunity, because so many questions around Atmos. How big my room needs to be? How many speakers I need to have? With what quality? Depends on. There is a standard, of course, of Dolby just specified how big your room needs to be regarding the dimensions, the height, the width, the depth, and the distance between your speakers and stuff like that. It can be overwhelming, of course, but it not necessarily needs to be, because there is a lot of Dolby resources on the internet, which is really good tools to do and prepare your Atmos switch if you want to do that. And let me show you how. Because on the Dolby website, and not on the default Dolby website, you have another solution which is called professionalsupport.dolby.com. It's a simple website for professionals, but in this website you have topics and articles for content creation, content encoding and distribution. You can download softwares as well. Even you have development kits for Android and Apple, and quick links for training courses, certifications, and downloads. And you can search for a very interesting tool called the Dolby Room, just a sec, Dolby Atmos Room Designer tool, which is technically speaking an Excel sheet with a lot of macros. Anybody ever seen the Dolby Atmos Room Designer tool? Okay, it's free. It's totally free from the Dolby website. And here comes the fun part. You can put in your studio's, name, this address and stuff like that. And later, you can put in your dimensions, and it's really helpful. I mean, you can put in the width, the height. Let's just say it's metric, so let's just say 3 meters. Why not? 3 meters in width. Oh, not 33. Sorry. Yeah, fine. Height can be 3 meters as well. Mix position 1. Why not? And you have everything, but not all the stuff. You have all the data about where you need to see a seat, where you need to put your speakers. If you choose from the database your speaker modules, which speaker you have, hundreds of speakers inside the database with all the data the manufacturer has provided. For example, if you have a, let's just say, why not, an Además V, and in that case, you will see the estimated headroom above the target SPL, the design delays, how you need to make the speaker delays with your speakers, how to put in those data to your software of your audio interface, where you need to place those speakers, how, and all the other data. So it's very straightforward. You don't need to learn all these equations, all the mathematic tips and frills. They'll be made that for free for you to just check how you should, transform your room to an Atmos listening experience. And back to the original case. So there's a lot of Dolby resources on the internet. Professional support.dolby.com. And we have our own dedicated tab to immersive audio, which is the Symphony Studio series. It's released last year, almost end of last year, the last part of last year. And we have 3 variations, the 2x12, the 8x8, and the 8x16. All 3 made for different purposes, for different needs. It's still a Symphony, with Symphony quality sound, Apogee flagship sound. It contains an input and output DSP, and all input mic and line. So no high-Z inputs with this family, but with the DI box, you have that one as well. USB class compliant, no Thunderbolt, no different adapters. USB-C class compliant, so it's compatible with Mac, PC, iOS, maybe even other platforms you need to check out because who knows, but with class compliant operation, it's really a multi-platform solution. Let's talk about some specifications. So, most important part for most of the users is the pricing and the lineup. So the 8x8, it's the US prices, of course. You need to check with your own dealers about European prices, but you can see the ratio between the prices. So $2,800 US for the 8x8 and $2,000, let's just be easier, for the 2x12. And 8x16 is a little bit up than $3,000, so $2,500. You have a bunch of buttons and a nice OLED screen, so you can see the channel selector, the inputs, the phantom power, the soft limit button. If you remember the 8000 back in the day from '97, since then we have the soft limit with our interfaces because users love to use that. Also, with the unit we have the studio monitor control menu. We have the home button, which is going to turn back everything. I mean, just jump out from the menus where you've been and see overview what's happening inside the interface. You have the headphone control buttons and the headphone outputs. It's not just 2 connectors for the headphones, but it's also 2 different, totally independent headphone matrices. So you can set up a submix for your singer. You can set up a submix for yourself, depends on your needs. The back of the unit, it's simple, but also a connection mayhem. To keep the price an acceptable level, we just choose to be on analog about the inputs and the outputs. So with that kind of options, you have a really straightforward price, but you need to have some DB25 cables for the outputs, especially if you have a bigger interface like the 8x16. It's USB-C class compliant and no external power supplies. Everything else is inside the box, just one rack unit. So finally, the 8x8 acts as a spiritual successor of the Ensemble Thunderbolt series, if some people remembers that. The Ensemble series now, it's out of production, but the Symphony Studio brings back the old and loved format to the market. So it's more like a project studio, Equid interface, and it's made for people who would like to record a bunch of channels, for example, a drum kit, but you don't necessarily want to work in immersive audio, but you still can do a 5.1 if you want to.
Or 5.1.2?
Yeah, even if you want to, that's possible because the software is the same. So you can do all the routing and all the stuff around you. Yeah.
At least have two, because with 8 you can have two.
Yeah, that's right. So you can do that, that's true. The 2x12 is the perfect Atmos player box, but we included two more microphone inputs if you want to record something, of course, with a single, a singer, a guitarist, something like that. So a 7.1.4 setup, it's 12 channels, that's why the 2x12 designation. So yeah, it's an Atmos player box. Even you can use the interface as a second rig just to upgrade your mixes to Atmos. And finally, the 8x16, it's best of both worlds and a little bit more because now you have 16 channels and 8 mic pre's. So you can record a drum kit and you can also do your Atmos mixes at the same time if you want to. Outboard gears, you name it, depends on your needs. So, but we have much more inside because we have input and output DSP, and the output DSP going to give you some really awesome tools. For example, speaker delay management. You can delay your speakers as the Dolby Atmos design tool let you and told you how to do that, how many milliseconds for each speaker. You have room simulation. I will show you soon. It's really a nice addition because you can type in the dimensions of your room, the material of your the material of the walls. I mean, it's concrete, dry board, depends on dry wall, something like that. You have room correction, which is a linear phase EQ with many bands, and you have bass management. At the same time, if you have multiple subwoofers, you can set up the crossover frequencies and many other things. You have two front-facing headphone outputs. As I mentioned, it's two totally independent headphone outputs. And we have the Apogee 0 ohm headphone technology, which means you can use any headphone between 30 and 600 ohms without any kind of loss. And this interface is also compatible with the Apogee control remote, but I will tell you a little bit more about this a little bit later. Just in a nutshell, this is all the specifications we have for the unit, and it's not on the Apogee website yet. So this is the second time in Europe where you can see this. All the dynamic range and D to E, A to D conversions, the headphone specifications and the mic pre specifications. You have 75 dB gain on the mic pre's, which means you don't need necessarily additional, sorry, please.
The maximum dB is like 75?
Yeah, how high you can crank up your gain with the mic pre's. So you don't need a small blue box for SM7B in that case. And it's not going to be a noise mayhem. That's also important. So if you crank up to 75 dB, the interface in itself is not going to be a shh. Trust me. We really spent so many efforts to avoid that situation, which is, happens time to time with certain products in the market. Features, the input DSP, why it matters. It's great for direct monitoring and also allows the performance to feel more inspired by the sound they hear. As I mentioned before, with the input DSP is technically a channel strip plugin. With that channel strip plugin, you can put compression or EQ to the ears of your singer, for example, to give him or her an impression what the final product will look like. But also, input DSP gives access to customers a more complete tool set. If you need some limiting, if you need some EQ because of de-essing or stuff like that, you can do that as well. So, depends on your needs. This is how it looks like. It's a standard Apogee Symphony ECS channel strip that we have. And you can enable on the Apogee Control 2 application. And it's a printafix, of course. If you use this, you need to record that kind of final result. So if you would like just give an impression to your singer, in that case, you need to turn it off during the recording. But we have an output DSP as well, which means we have the speaker delay, the bass management, the room simulation, and the room correction at the same time. And this is really handy to tune your Atmos listening setup because you have multiple speakers, sometimes phase issues, depends on, so you need some stuff to make this right. For example, this is the room simulation. You have multiple options to put in the material of your room, I mean the wall materials, which can be wood, concrete, drywall, depends on the dimensions of your room, and you have imperial and metric options as well to have the best solution. And with it, you will have a room simulation which is going to alter your sound in that case, and all the data you need, the Schroeder frequency and all the absorption equations and many other things. And you have room correction, which is a linear phase EQ, and we're working on a solution to have multiple options to import data from other places to this room EQ to have a more complete solution. But this room EQ is really a true linear phase EQ. It's really close to that. So you can tune your room. If you have a measurement from some months ago, you can also type in those results if you want to. You have bass management as well. In that case, any output can be a subwoofer. You can put in the crossover frequency and the filter slope, how you would like to alter your subwoofer sound to be the most phase clean and the cleanest sound as possible.
I have one question.
Yeah.
In a Dolby Atmos room, is acceptable to use different kind of monitors, or is it can be using the delay and the EQ do the trick, or you need to have the same model of monitor for all the speakers?
Okay, so very good question. To be honest, you have multiple options inside the software. You have the monitor workflow, let's just say selectors. You can have up to 8 different speaker setup, which means you can have a standard stereo speaker setup if you want to, even an RCR, depends on your default kind of things. And you can have the 5.1, the 7.1.4, the smaller Atmos setup, or a 9.1.6, the bigger Atmos setup, or a totally custom one. Depends on your actual home setup or your studio setup. And every different setup you can have different bass management settings. So you don't need to recalibrate or alter the settings of your existing system if you want to change the monitoring solutions you have. So yeah, you don't need to do that. So monitor workflows. Customers who make Atmos mixes also usually needs to work in stereo, just to check the mix or deliver a different format. And also those people would like to change between those formats. As we discussed, you don't need to recalibrate your room for each setup. It's just a simple touch of a button. Perfect for users also who would like to use different set of monitors. For example, you have an Auraton or an NS10 alongside with your full-fledged big speakers in your studio. The switch is easy as a industry standard these days. So for example, if you select the 7.1.4, you can check which speaker which, and on the bottom you can check also which speaker is which output at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and on and on. It's easy to see which speaker is which. To set up the whole system don't need to be necessarily a difficult operation. And the Control 2 software. Back in the day, Apogee had many different softwares for many different products. Now we have just one common ground for every product we have. It's going to be easier because it's familiar. It's more or less based on the old Symphony control, but now compatible with all of our interfaces from the boom to up to the biggest Symphony configurations. And we have new features. For example, we have talkback, which means if you have a laptop, you can use the microphone of your laptop to be a talkback device for your singer. You do not necessarily need to put in a microphone, an analog actual microphone, to talk to your singer if you want to the headphones. You can use your laptop's microphone if you want to. For many users, it's ease of a pain. You not necessarily need to buy something. Also, monitor control and remote integration is also possible now for all of our interfaces. The Apogee control, which I will show you a little bit later, it's not necessarily just compatible with the Symphonies, but with all of our interfaces now. So now you have a remote for everything. And we have the loopback function as well. For so many users, it's a necessity. So this is how the software looks like. You can see the inputs, the outputs, the status of your interface on the left side, which interface you are using, and which sample rate, peak hold, overhold for the to the meters, and analog output setup, monitor workflows, where you've seen the different configurations of your monitors, and the talkback settings, and many other things. And we have 2 different mixers that you can set up for your studio. And all the meters for differs on the configuration, how many output channels you have and how many headphone outputs you have. And you can select which headphone output is which playback bus from your DAW. So it's totally 2 different headphone outputs in that case. And you have a really fast and convenient selector for monitor workflow and for the speaker set. So you can set which speaker you want to use in which format. So technically it's limitless. So the Apogee control. It's a configuration freedom option for many users. Assign monitor workflows for quick recall, access talkback, change input gain and output levels. So technically all the important functions of your interface you can reach way more easier. And as you can see, you have buttons inside the remote, which means an ABC, I mean 1, 2, 3 and ABCD. It's up to you how you would like to configure your monitor control, your Apogee control, technically speaking. No limitations, no linear way to reach out some actual functions. Depends on how you would like to use the device. So technically, thank you very much, people, for being here with us. Some minutes from now, after a very short break, we're going to patch in Los Angeles, California, where from Bob Clearmountain, legendary mixing engineer, going to answer some of your questions. So if you have some questions to Bob about Atmos, about the old times, about the classic era of rock music, feel free to come up with. And if we are being lucky a bit, maybe we have someone else inside that call. I don't know for sure because he's a little bit sick these days, but let's hope for that. So yeah, Apogee defining the digital audio's potential since the last century, and we would like to be around for such a long time. We would like to invent things which going to make music creation, mixing, mastering, production easier for so many people. So yeah, after Bob's presentation, we're going to see an actual mixing session with some really famous tracks which we're going to represent you in a surround way of listening experience. So thank you very much. 10 minutes break, and we will continue from here. Thank you.
Okay. Si queremos hablar aquí en petit comité de todo lo que es Atmos o alguna duda que tengamos ahora, disparamos. O sea...
We're going to have time to ask more questions, but if you have some urgent questions, of course, I'm here to serve you. So please, if you have any questions about Atmos, about Apogee plugins or Apogee interfaces, feel free to ask. But later, we're going to see some Apogee plugins in action to see how we can imagine to shaping the sound.
One of the questions my friend has here is that, oh, sorry. I thought you were talking.
All good.
No. My friend had because mastering in Dolby Atmos is very different. It's almost like remixing in a sense. Yeah. There's no bus for the whole, channels. So my friend was asking if there was like a compressor for all the buses, but I was explaining to him that mastering for Atmos is almost like remixing.
Yeah, pretty much. And you need to decide how much freedom you have. For example, if you're a mastering engineer, not you, the mixing engineer at the same time, you need to know how much freedom you have to reshape the mix for Atmos.
Yeah, I work with a Spanish guy that moved to Berlin, and I sent him, the work, and of course, he always asks that. I like a little bit more air on the hi-hat. Can I pull it up a little bit? So there's also some creative with mastering, not just levels or EQing, but really creative
Especially if you have a good mix, because in that case, you not necessarily need to fix some problems, but you need to elevate the whole mix to another level, make better. Yeah, exactly.
It's important to know that in Dolby Atmos, the rules are completely different. I mean, you have a limit. You cannot overpass minus 18 loops and minus one true peak. Everything you pass this level, nobody will accept it. It will sound distorted, and it's a completely different league. It's not like on stereo that we are fighting about minus 8 or minus 6 or minus 4 loops. In Dolby Atmos, things are more relaxed. So
And I like it because you end up you finish the war with the volume war that we had in the 90s and 80s that was horrible, that destroyed so much music. And with Dolby Atmos, you get back that big headroom at minus 18, so you have a lot of headroom, and you don't need to really put all the volume, which I hated always. I really like mastering from the 80s and early 90s because they don't subject the music to a lot of stress.
Yeah. Maybe you guys, if to be more comfortable with this kind of idea, because as you guys silently told me, you're not necessarily working in Atmos at this very moment. If you ever delivered a really loud mix for a streaming platform, it's not going to be the sound is going to be way worse than you experience in your own studio. For example, if you upload your loud mix to YouTube, it's going to be so compressed because the algorithm of YouTube going to just destroy your music if it's loud, the whole perception. Yeah, so technically speaking, for the online platforms, you need to check which platform uses which level for your material.
That's kind of paradox because it was supposed that when platforms were using a loops restriction like minus 14, minus 15, depends on the platform, it's supposed to end the loudness war, but nobody put back the foot on the pedal,
Especially since the introduction of the soft clippers.
Look at this. The people is working and loops and minors two. So it's imagine. So the thing is, there is some kind of gain stage in the Dolby Atmos mixing. There is some kind of levels, standard levels.
There is some nice software developers like Ginger Audio, for example, who developed this Sphere software, which can give you a bunch of nice tools to do this, but also the Dolby additional softwares like the Dolby Renderer and the Dolby Spanner, it also can use as a plugin. So in that case, you can set up a nice output bus system, let's just say that, to take control of your material for Atmos.
I found out that for Atmos, for me, it works Studio One. I work on Pro Tools and Cubase, but Studio One is really friendly.
Yeah, that's right.
It also has like a volume on the main renderer, so if you can either turn it a little bit or turn it down, which helps.
Yeah, and you not necessarily need to buy the Dolby renderer separately because it's included to the DAW now. For example, Logic, Studio One, Horizon Mix Bus, and a lot of other DAWs now contains the Dolby renderer. Yeah.
A good point on Studio One is that when you're working with objects, the objects on the panel are using the same color of your track. So you can have a very visual impact on what's going. That's the hat, and that's the kick, and that's the bass. It's sorry, but I'm also in Studio One.
Many DAWs now going better and better, especially in immersive audio. Because back in the day, it was a necessity to buy the Dolby renderer for several $100s to work in Atmos. You need to buy a lot of speakers, you need to buy a lot of additional cables, adapters for your ceiling, and the Dolby renderer for several $100s. So it's a big investment. Now, fortunately, with more affordable speaker bundles, like the IQ Multimedia bundle is, or with the included renderers in many DAWs, now let's just say the jump-in price to Atmos is going to be more and more and more friendly each year. So now if in your area you don't have too much competitors in Atmos and you would like to deliver really world-class content and learn how to mix in immersive, because if you know how to mix in stereo, that's good, but mixing in Atmos, that's a different approach, absolutely. It's easier sometimes, because you don't have the same two speakers as a canvas. You have multiple options. You can pan your stuff around you and above you. And in that way, mixing in some point is easier, but also you need to learn a lot how to mix, not just in immersive, but in surround. So yeah, because all the tools and all the courses in the Dolby website is free, it's just up to you how much you would like to learn about this concept, how to use Atmos.
I have the feeling that for Dolby Atmos, we are in similar position that when stereo was introduced, that nobody knows how to produce in stereo, and you have records with drums and bass on the left and vocals and guitars at the right. Until there was some kind of standard, so bass and kick and voice more or less in the center, guitars hard pan, you know. It will take some time to have a standard into Dolby Atmos, but while it doesn't arrive, let's do all the crazy things, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
With some measure, I mean, it makes no sense having flying guitars over you all the time.
Yeah, the first days of Atmos was a little bit messy, let's just say, because not all the people knew what to do. Yeah, so please.
I have a question.
Please, the mic? Yeah.
Most of the producers of music
Yeah.
use this technology
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, depends on, because all the A-list users of Atmos, I mean producers, engineers, they now deliver Atmos mixes for every A-list, artists. It's available now, even remixing old records to Atmos. But of course, yeah, most home producers, the majority of home producers, not capable to do proper Atmos mixes these days because they don't know anything about the technology. They not necessarily know how to jump into this because it's too expensive, it's too complicated. They don't want to. They cannot imagine how to work in immersive because it's not the same feeling as stereo. You can feel Atmos in your earbuds, but if you feel surround in your speakers, from your speakers, with your speakers, that's a different approach. So yeah, the majority of creators these days not using Atmos, that's true. But all the major A-list people who creating music these days, what you listen on Spotify, your favorite artist, they have Atmos mixes, and that's an important thing to know.
That's a point. Big artists, big name, big bands. Of course, everybody is getting into Atmos directly. But indie artists or urban artists with no budget, they're still in stereo. So it's a big opportunity to get into Dolby Atmos before it's going to be bigger, because this way you can overpass the others. It will be easy to get into playlists and these kind of things. And also, brands like Apple are putting a lot of money into getting into Atmos, doing mixes, new Atmos mixes of old albums. Many Dolby Atmos studios are doing that job, doing remasters into Atmos, which is a tricky thing because they have to work with stereo tracks, with stems sometimes, depending on how many stems the studio provides. It will be a more immersive or less immersive Atmos remaster, and it's some kind of, there is a big market opportunity at the moment. It's not massive, it's growing and growing. And it's interesting what's happening in that environment.
Absolutely, and if in your area you don't have much competition on the Atmos League, and some artist of yours would like to experience that different delivery, maybe you can be the first. Just remember how the crypto business started back in the day. The first few guys became billionaires. That's the same analogy in your area. If you don't have much competition, you can get work because you're going to be the first in your area. For example, in the US and in some other countries, Atmos is a big thing. If you go to the Dolby website and you check the Atmos certified list of studios, you can check how many Atmos certified studios in your country, how many Atmos certified studios worldwide, and you can get a picture how empty is your market is or not. So it's not just I put all my savings to an Atmos conversion, and nobody would like to work with me because so many Atmos studios around me. You need to decide. But in my experience, I'm traveling a lot, trust me, in so many countries, there's still a lot of room to enter the Atmos game, and you do not necessarily need to buy tens of thousands of euros, worth of speakers.
Also the audiobooks right now in Audible, they're coming out in immersive.
Yeah, that's right, also. So not just in the music business.
in
Yeah.
video games, and also Apple is paying more if
Yeah.
your music is immersive.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
also, what?
Or they give you priority
Exactly for
to
playlists. Also, they in Apple is not called Dolby Atmos. It's called spatial and immersive.
That's right.
And because like they have the same Dolby Atmos license, but they changed the name.
That's
you know,
right.
I guess
That's
they made
right.
some deal
That's
there.
why you have, for example, the Dolby and the Apple renderer in so many DAWs.
Exactly. And Studio One you can put your stereo, binaural,
yeah.
spatial, 5.1, 7.1, so you can listen to how it's going to sound in Apple, how it's going to
Exactly.
sound in Tidal,
Exactly.
the binaural,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, that's right.
And-
Sorry if
okay.
I'm interrupting you, but now it's time. So let me patch California and the Apogee studios. Yeah. Oh yeah, people, get ready. So, hey Bob, how you doing? You can hear us?
Hey, Tony.
Hey, how you doing, Bob?
Good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. It's good. It's good.
Okay,
It's
good.
absolutely good. So now we are here in Barcelona. People, let me introduce you, Mr. Bob Clearmountain and his assistant engineer, Ira Becker, in the background. Hi, guys.
All right, we're just getting ready for our mix here.
So we're just discussing a few things about Atmos and immersive audio, how we approach this Apogee to the immersive audio field. But you know, you are a working engineer in the Atmos business, but you also spent decades in the 5.1 mixing field.
Yeah.
So how hard,
That's right.
how hard it was to switch to Atmos? What was your experience?
Really easy. It was just, more channels, more speakers. I mean, it's not that. I don't find it's that much different. There's just a bit more, more places to put sounds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, because now you have height speakers. But the thing is that the people either are listening back on headphones, so it's pretty much the same on headphones, I think, from what I can tell, or on a 5.1 system like a Sonos system or something like that, where it's basically 5.1 and the side speakers are it's like a phantom side speaker, which works pretty well on a lot of systems. And then the overheads, it's just sound bouncing off the ceiling if you have a nice low flat ceiling, which I don't actually in my apartment now.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, recently you're forced to work differently than before. So how are you holding up these days with Atmos?
Yeah, well, for example, you see I'm mixing on this gadget here. This is a SSL System T. This is their smallest model of the System T mixer, and which is really it was originally just a broadcast console or a front of house desk, and but it's got some basic automation in there, and because my old G series SSL went up in smoke, they lent me this for the last couple of months really, and I mixed about 4 albums or something like that. It's pretty good for Atmos actually, because you can automate all your pans and it's pretty easy it's got some pretty great. The surround panner is really good. It's got this sort of up and down thing, and you could actually pan a stereo stereo track around, but you can't do that. Can't do that on the Pro Tools panel. I think you can in Logic, but they've done a sort of a nice thing.
Yeah, and we discussed here how perpetual Atmos is. How it's just a trend. It's just it's about just fashion, but it's not really a perpetual thing for the future. What do you think about Atmos? How long Atmos going to be with us?
I have no idea. Really, I really don't know. I'm hoping that it's going to be around for a long time because, I've made a pretty good investment, and I'm making another investment, building a new room, and that's all
Exactly.
really getting set up right from the start as an Atmos mix room. And, so it's costly. I'm a little concerned because it doesn't seem like it's being promoted to the general public as it should be. I think Apple Music and Tidal and Amazon, a few streaming services that are streaming it, you don't really hear much about it from them, and it's really hard to, if you want to find a specific piece of music mixed in Atmos, it's very difficult to find it. You know what I mean? Like if you, on Apple Music, if you click on spatial audio, which is what they call it, it's their sort of version of it. You just get a playlist of random songs. There's, somebody created a playlist, and hopefully all of them are actually in immersive. Sometimes some of them aren't.
Yeah.
But it's just random. Like if you want to find a specific song, and they tell me, and I've talked to them about it, and they said, well, the general public doesn't do that. They don't really try to find a specific song mixed in Atmos,
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe because there hasn't been enough promotion in that direction. Say, look, you should hear this,
Yeah.
and instead of it just being a random thing that you might come across.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine how a very good Atmos mix can sound, after stereo. It's a different dimension.
Yeah, and the thing is that when if the mix is done right, it's an incredible thing, especially if you have a system that you can play it back on. And there's more and more systems nowadays that are available, and very low-priced systems as well. A Sonos immersive system doesn't cost much more than a good hi-fi.
That's right.
In fact, it's less than a high-end stereo.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so it's not that much. And there's a lot of cars lately that are coming out with immersive systems, proper Atmos systems. And a car is a great place to listen because you're kind of surrounded.
Yeah, with all the speakers.
By the speakers. It's really good. I mean, I've heard some of my mixes in the Lucid and I think there's a Cadillac. There's a few others, and the Mercedes, and of course they're all high-end cars. Unfortunately, they're expensive cars. But man, it sounds like what they're supposed to sound like. It's fantastic. Really works well.
Yeah.
So there are ways to hear it properly.
Absolutely. So, dear crowd, if you have any questions to Bob, please just let us know, because now is the time to get some answers from the master himself, please, about anything. Okay, first one.
Hi, Mr. Clearmountain. I'm a big fan since the 80s. Used to buy your albums without knowing music. And I heard many of your videos you've done about immersive and stereo, also about how hi-fi in the 90s was only for cars. You made a video, I remember sometime, about how hi-fi was the only place to listen to, after the MP3 came out. And now that I have the Atmos system in my studio, the speakers on the top speakers, I don't know if you had problems at the beginning that your brain automatically puts them on the floor. Like at the beginning, I was not used to having speakers on my head, and automatically, like acoustically, my head puts them on the floor. I feel them like they're on my side. I don't know why is that. Right now, it doesn't happen to me anymore. It took a while for my brain to put them up. You didn't have any problems with the high speakers at the beginning to get used to them?
The ceiling speakers.
Speakers.
But I I don't know, a lot of times I don't really even notice them. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I know what you mean. Sometimes it's hard to tell where something is in height. That's why I don't think the height speakers are as important as that people make them out to be. I know when you set up your room, it's very important that they're at a certain angle and they're, but I don't think it's actually that important. I should just put ambience up there. And oh shit, sorry. That's my phone. Sorry. So yeah, so I know what you're saying. It's just, sometimes they don't. In fact, sometimes the rear speakers, if I don't move, and if I'm just sitting here mixing, sometimes I can't tell that something's in the back. It sounds like it's in the front, And until I like move my head a little bit, I go, oh right, yeah, it is back there.
Yeah.
And I'm running into another problem on this system T. It's got a screen right here in front of it's almost in front of the center speaker. And so sometimes it's blocking that. And then sometimes the sound from the rear speakers is bouncing off the screen. And I go, that's weird. That sounds like it's in the front. Why? And then I stand up and oh, yeah, it is. But it's just because the sound was bouncing off the screen. So there's a lot of funny things that you got to watch out for.
Get used to it.
Yeah.
Somebody else, ladies and gents?
I will follow. My question is, how do you deal with the LFE channel on music production? Just use it for some special moments. You put something like bass or kick on the sub channel. How you deal with that?
All right. Well, as far as for the binaural part of it or the spatial audio, people listening on headphones, it doesn't mean much of anything. In fact, you got to be careful about it because if you put too much in there, you can't turn it down, and the mixer doesn't have any control over how much of the LFE channel goes into the binaural part of it, and so that's one thing. But I usually put some bass drum, tom-toms, anything that's low frequencies. If there's a string section, maybe the contrabass or the violas or something like that, anything with low end, because when you're hearing it on a proper system with an LFE speaker, it really enhances it, and it does the thing for it, especially like synth bass. It's an amazing thing. It'll really add a big thing to like a good synth bass part. I mixed something from the 60s for Howard Jones, and he had this DX7 bass from the 80s, and it just did a wonderful thing for that. It just sounded huge. And so it's nice for things like that.
Oh, yeah.
Great.
Okay, then.
Someone else?
Yeah, someone else? Maybe. You can do your question in Spanish. We can translate it, so it's not a problem. If you would like to do that way. It's not a problem, absolutely. Something else?
Yes, I just
Okay.
have a question. I've had the experience that when I am mixing and I change to Apple Spatial, and then I change to the speakers, 5.1, 7.1, it produces very, very good, I feel when I take my headphones out and put my monitors, it sounds very, very similar. Do you have that experience that if you mix a little bit, or some people are mixing on headphones right now with, let's say the Apple ones or the AirPlays, and when you mix on the, let's say Studio One has you can switch it to the Apple Immersive or the Apple Spatial, and when you change it to speakers, it sounds like I had my headphones on. It translates really good when you mix on your headphones to the speakers. Do you have that experience that it translates really good?
It's pretty good, yeah. Can I ask you what headphones you're using? Because I want to get a pair. Because it's not. I don't know. I always find this a little disappointing.
I use the Apple ones. I've been working on these ones.
Earbuds.
And yes, and my son took the big ones, the Air ones, the other day. But I've been working with these ones, and it translates beautiful. I mean, when I put the speakers, I was really amazed because when I worked with DTS or Dolby Digital, it was very difficult to mix on headphones and then translate it to the speakers.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I just got a new pair of their latest Apple headphones, so I'm gonna try them today.
I think Apple is releasing a new firmware, not for the AirPods Pro, but for the big ones. I think it's going to be released this month, if it's not has been released. And it's trying to do the best professional headphones for monitoring on spatial audio or something like that. I think I have read a few days ago.
My experience is that they translate really good when I change to my monitors, you know. I don't listen like, oh, it sounds so different, you know. Of course, the bass that you were talking about, the LFE, I have to be careful, you know, because headphones don't respond the same.
But on the binaural, you don't have LFE. So, yeah. Then I have a question about binaural and spatial audio, because when using these formats, because of the virtualization to channels, there is some kind of reverb appearing. Is there any tip when mixing or producing to avoid this, or to soften this reverb effect on binaural or spatial audio?
God, I wish there was, you know, that's the unfortunate thing, especially with this Apple spatial audio. They actually add ambience. What I usually do is I keep the front three channels, the LCR, I don't put any binaural, I keep them all in off mode on the binaural settings, and then I put the sides and all the other speakers in near mode, and then I think the high speakers I'll put in mid, something like that. So I won't ever use the far mode, because then it really adds a lot of, changes.
That's okay for binaural, because binaural reads this information, but I think Apple doesn't read that. So that's a little bit something that Apple should work on it, I mean.
I know, it's unfortunate with the Apple Music, because Apple Music does processing on the LCR as well on the front, which kind of is annoying to me. When I switch to it, it sounds like the vocal gets a little bit, moves back a little bit, or it has some effect on it. It's a bit disconcerting. I prefer the binaural out of the renderer, because I have control.
And do you use the central speaker for vocals, or you just use the stereo? Because some engineers...
I use the center speaker. In fact, sometimes I put too much in the center speaker, but with some divergence. Anything that's in the center, I put a little bit on the sides, from the front, left and right. But yes, vocal, bass, snare drum, bass drum, you know, solos sometimes. I think that the center speaker is very important for my mixing, the way I mix.
I've heard that Sorry. I just heard that some record labels don't want the central speaker for the vocals. Do you have that experience from some record labels?
Well, of course, we know how intelligent people at record labels are.
Exactly.
And yeah, I suppose they should be really the people that decide these sorts of artistic decisions.
That's what I think, yeah.
Obviously, I'm being sarcastic.
I know.
And,
I have your opinion on this, you know?
yeah, I would completely ignore those comments from labels, because they're really full of it. And so, yeah, I think, not only that, but I like to, when I finish an Atmos mix, I like to walk around the room, and I like everything to stay in its place. Because to me, it's you're creating a sound stage with your Atmos, right? At least for me. You know, I'm not telling anybody how to mix, of course. But and so that way, the vocal is always in the center. It just stays there. If I don't use that, then anything that's in the phantom center, then it becomes the same problem. I have the same problem with stereo. If I come over to the right, now everything that was in the center is now coming out of the right speaker. And see, that upsets me, because to me, I think everything should be where I put it and stay there, no matter where I'm sitting.
Yeah.
Just how I feel.
Yeah. Okay, people. Any last questions to Bob Clearmountain? We know everything. You're the best. Thank you very much, Bob. Thank you for your time.
Right, very much. I really appreciate people just listening to my opinions.
Oh,
And they are, of course, you know, everybody has their way of doing things.
absolutely. That's what we discussed previously. I mean, multiple approaches to Atmos and immersive mixing. You can
Exactly.
sculpt your own sound. Exactly.
Yeah, but don't let any record companies tell you what to do. That's what I said, you know.
Thank you very much, Bob, and have a good day. Have a productive day. See you soon.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, and our only lady here. So, what we discussed previously in a nutshell is maybe you don't feel yet to jump into Atmos is maybe a worthwhile idea. But later, when this format becoming a mandatory thing for online streaming services, not for YouTube maybe, but for Spotify, Tidal, Apple Music, and if you have all the stuff to start to deliver tomorrow, you're going to have an advantage because we are not billionaires, not millionaires. We cannot buy a whole system overnight, most of us, obviously. And now you still have time to prepare, to collect some money, develop your system step by step. For example, upgrade to 5.1. Listen your mixes in 5.1 and learn how to mix in surround. Later you can step up. And also you can use your earbuds, your Apple AirPods, depends on how you would like to approach the immersive audio mixing. But as I mentioned, you still have time. Later, when this thing going to be mandatory, you not necessarily have time, and who has a system or the knowledge, at least, to work in Atmos, they're going to have an advantage. Now is the time, in our opinion. Thank you very much, people. 10 minutes break. We need to reroute the whole thing to check some mixing projects from Bob's discography in Logic Pro with Apogee plugins. What's the difference with and without? And listen some stuff in 5.1 and have a better idea about how traditional older 5-point mix sounds and how a really modern, absolutely, let's just say, experimental approach sounds in surround sound. And it's not even Atmos what we have right now, so just 5.1, but it's worthwhile. Okay, so we have some projects here. This time from Logic, because it's a little bit easier than hook up so many outboards and many other stuffs to represent something. So this is the mixing session of the Bob Clearmountain classic Born in the USA from Bruce Springsteen. And this time, all the project just remixed by Bob. He spent a lot of time on this to remix the project with only Apogee plugins to match the sound, the exact sound, how the original sounded. So yeah, this shows us multiple things. The first thing is no DAW is a limitation. That's one thing. The second thing is with Apogee plugins, you can reach out to the same sound as a really big and expensive outboard-based studio can give it to you. So who's aware how this track sounds, Born in the USA? It's an old track, yeah. This is going to be our first approach, but not the only one. I will show you some other projects today. So let's start with this. Let's just hear the sounds first.
1, 2, 3, 4.
This is a stereo mix, just to check and hear how Apogee plugin sounds, because showing you how to sculpt the sound in immersive audio, we don't have enough time for that. It's a whole different approach. So it's a stereo mix.
Born down in a
Yeah, this is a Bob Clearmountain classic track. And now we see how our plugins can sculpt the sound of some channels. For example, how you got it as a mixing engineer and what we achieved it with the plugins. Let's just, before the snare, let's just check, for example, the piano sound. The piano sound without a simple Apogee EQ sounds like this. Because we have a Clearmountain series of plugins. For example, you can now see the Clearmountain plugin, which is the exact replica how Bob's outboard sounded back in the day. How he made this mix with all the vintage models that he has. Add another layer, but without the layers. that's one approach from a classic track. But let me show you something surroundish kind of things, not just a stereo mix. Well, let's just see. What if some polyphia? Tim Henson. That's a modern approach, a modern track, and really a modern sound. It's not from Bob Clearmountain. This mix made by another engineer. But this track is going to be on 5.1. It's an Atmos mix originally. But we have a 5.1 setup here, so let's...
Yeah, that's a good point on Atmos. It's compatible with all formats. I mean, you can work with Atmos and deliver in 5.1 or 7.1 or stereo or binaural. It's automatically adapts to the format. So
yes, absolutely. Here in the screen you can see the actual Dolby Atmos renderer in Logic technically gives you multiple listening format possibilities. The binaural thing with the Dolby renderer and the Apple renderer for your headphone mixes, with a possible head tracking device, but that's a different case, and with the speaker kind of opportunities, the stereo 2.1, 5.1, 7.1, 5.1.4, that's a bit odd, but it's pseudo Atmos, let's just say that, and the 7.1.4 kind of format. So, I suggest let's start from stereo, just to elevate the whole experience in some cases. Oh, sorry, I just made a loop. That's good. Let's see how the 5.1 version sounds. I will start with the stereo and I will switch. discussed before, there is some different approaches in immersive audio, which means this is a modern approach. You don't have necessary rules because your listening audience not necessarily expecting something from you, how you sculpt your mix with this modern track. But what if you would like to remix something which is an older hit song? Now, there's going to be a different approach. Let's just say Brian Adams Ran to You from Bob Clearmountain. There's going to be a different mix. Let's just see this, just a second. I need to change this. Let's just start with stereo.
She says her love for me could never die.
So now, what do you think about this? There's no bad answers, no wrong answers. But in my opinion, it's not necessarily better or worse, but a totally different approach where you have multiple opportunities to elevate your sound to a different level. And this is, as I mentioned, just simple 5.1. With Atmos, you have another dimension, not just horizontally, but vertically as well. And you can attach multiple subwoofers, for example, to your system if you want to have a bigger soundscape. And this is what we discussed before also, all the formats compatible with each other. You can switch between stereo, 5.1, 7.1, 7.1.4, or any configuration, you name it. Later, this is going to be mandatory with all the streaming services, and maybe you can now see why. Because it's a different level of an experience. It's a different way to hear music, and it's not just for film. I will show you something else. And after that project, I suggest we can decide which projects we open, and I suggest to switch places between the center position, because the best way to listening surround or even immersive audio is from the center, where everything's the best regarding the experience. I will show you something else from a Grammy Award-winning mixing engineer from India. His name is P.A. Deepak. And yeah, this is going to be a modern approach, a very busy mix with a lot of objects. So many objects. So with 5.1, it's going to be really different. Let's see. It's a song from India. Unfortunately, with this project, I don't have the mix.
No, to the mixer, to the mixer.
Ah, yeah, no problem, no problem. Yeah. You can see the pans here. I need to have this somewhere around, but maybe this is. So with this mix, unfortunately, I don't have the actual mixing project in Logic because we need to cross-compatible. But this is the same mix, how he did it. As you can see, a lot of channels in there. Just a second. A lot of channels, but with very different panning solutions. And all the outputs are surround outputs, I mean, going to the surround bus. So it's a really busy mix, and check the renderer later with 5.1, how many objects moving around. This is one of the busiest Atmos mixes I ever heard, and I heard a lot, trust me. I mean, if you're traveling to a lot of places around the globe and talking to people about Atmos, they're showing you their mixes, they want to listen to their mixes, and the other mixes I bring, and I rarely see that many objects moving around in a mix, and it's not bad. So let's just see the stereo for the first time.
मैं जा रहा unavailable हूँ network के बाहर मैं untraceable तू फिर से नाराज and it's fine जो मुझसे खफा उनकी लंबी है line है अब से मैं first सपने हैं पहले तेरे feelings like sushi जल से allergy जिसको निकलना पड़ेगा मैं तो क्यों मैं famous You never hold me back मैं चढ़ चुका तकदीर का जहाज यकीन तुझ पे ना बेमान पहने सत्य का लिबास क्या कहेगी तू मान या ना मान ना बन सकूंगा तेरा अब है मुझ पे मेरा ध्यान मैं जान तो गया तुझे पहचान ना सका दूर तुझसे जाना था मैं आ गया जब ओ कितना मैनू तंग तू बड़ा मेरी जान क्यों छट मैनू गली चला गया तू जबान याद तेरी आना देनी आनी मैनू सुन चला गया जापान कितना मैनू तंग तू बड़ा मेरी जान No, this thing I sent to Turkey I know the stars are shining but lucky I run for my life
He was not putting too much elements behind or above the head.
Yeah, exactly.
Curious.
Exactly. And, as we discussed before, there is no rules, especially with modern tracks, because nobody's going to expect anything from you. And in that case, you have multiple options. One last thing. I wanted to have this session as lifelike as possible, which means, let me show you something. We not yet, button below, we not yet set up the bass with the software. We never did the room correction or the room simulation, which means this experience can be way better. Not to mention, in Atmos, that's another axis you have, not just horizontally, but vertically as well. And in the meantime, if you have some time sometimes to check And Atmos makes with headphones, with the Dolby renderer and with the Apple renderer, two different experiences. With the Apple renderer, technically you have a way more, let's just say, alive listening experience. With the Dolby renderer, it's a little bit more static, but you need to feel it for yourself. So people, thank you very much for being here with us. I hope we just gave you another perspective about where the music goes, where mixing technologies goes, where the audio technology goes, and I really hope we can see you in the list of the future Apogee users if you are not an Apogee user yet. Thank you very much and have a successful night.